you need me to make you a host, Ari?
Oh, no. We're good. I'm starting right now. Okay.
Oh, great.
I was just taking care of some technology on my side. Okay, it is absolutely fabulous to see you all here this morning. Feel free to. Are we muting everybody? Everybody's muted. Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry, I muted you as well.
All right. Thank you, Annie. First of all, round of applause for Annie for taking care of all the logistics. Thank you. Thank you. I can't hear you guys. I'm kidding. I know because you're muted. So here's what we're gonna do. This is gonna be a fabulous 6-week journey together, exploring some really, really important topics and interesting topics within Jewish thought. I'm really super excited when an email came out from Ollie, I don't know, maybe a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, about kind of exploring some options with virtual teaching, and they were asking instructors who would be up to doing this virtually, doing these classes virtually. So I emailed back immediately saying, count me in, ready to go. I can't think of a better way to spend my Tuesday mornings than with all of you. So I want you to know that there was never a doubt that we would do this together, and I'm super happy, super happy to be here with you and to see all of you. And I hope you're all in good health and safe and taken care of, and you have whatever you need. And I should mention, by the way, if you need anything, please reach out and I can help. We have volunteers that I'm connected with that have raised their hand, so to speak, to help in any way. So if you need any help, or if you know anyone that needs help, please don't hesitate to reach out. Not only don't hesitate, but please do reach out. My email address, very easy to remember for me because it's my email address, but hopefully also for you, Rabbi Ari, Rabbiari at chabadintown.org. Chabad is spelled Chabad, Intown, INTOWN.org. Again, if you need anything or know anybody that needs anything, whether it's a call, whether it's help with shopping, anything, just please reach out, and we have folks that can help. Okay, so that is that. But again, it's getting back to the class. I am super excited to see all of you. I have my computer set up to gallery view in Zoom, which means that I see all those little boxes. You can either see whoever's speaking, which would be me in this case right now, or you can, and that's just only that is your screen, that takes up your whole screen, or you can do it in gallery view where you can see individual boxes of people, which I'm looking at right now, so I get to see all of you at the same time, which is kind of cool. It's like the virtual classroom, not like it is the virtual classroom, and it reminds me of the Brady Bunch, so that's always good. Yeah. So Marsha, this is how we're gonna get rolling. Okay, so let's talk about the course. Before we get into the course, just so you know, I've been doing a lot of classes on Zoom, and some of you have been taking classes with me on Zoom. Hey Stan, good to see you, and others. So, and Ray, is Ray here? I thought I heard Ray before. Okay, maybe she's not here. Fine. And others, and Muriel. Right, oh, there you go. Okay. So here's the deal. I love interaction. So at any point, and I'm thinking you can do this, at any point, please unmute yourself to ask a question, to interject with a comment, or whatever it is. This should be kind of like as close as possible to the in-person experience. The only reason why everyone has been muted right now is because the nature of things is that if we have a large group and everybody is unmuted, everyone has a little bit of background noise in their background, right? Just a little bit, but when you have that compounded, a lot of people, so it just creates a big hum, and sometimes it's hard to hear. So for sake of clarity of listening, that's why by default everyone is going to be muted. But at any point, unmute yourself. So let's make sure that everyone knows how to do that, and we're all on the same page. So if everyone can please unmute yourself right now and say hi.
Hi.
Then
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
There you go.
Everybody.
Fantastic. Okay, good. So it looks like most everybody has done that, and everyone. Okay,
Right.
awesome. Oh, by the way, I should mention. I forgot to mention. Hi. So for me. Okay, so it looks like everyone is we're all on the same page here. Let's once again mute yourself so that we have that clean background for sound. Okay, great. So everyone is now back on mute. I'm looking around. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Okay, 1 second. Oh, very cool. Okay, we have even 2 pages of folks. All right, so let's jump in. Now that we got the preliminaries out of the way, we're all on the same page. Oh, one more thing. Sorry, I keep on remembering things. There is a chat box, as was mentioned before. So at any point, you can hit the chat, and if you go down, at least on my computer, if you go down to the bottom of the screen, you hit chat. You can send me a chat privately, or you can send a chat to everybody, or you could send chats to people in the class. You know, you can pass notes to each other like back in the day. It's kind of like, I would never know because it's, student to student. So anyway, so feel free the point is this should be as interactive as possible. Oh, and one more thing. I'm getting a chat. It's coming in. It's working. Okay, there we go. Textbooks. Textbooks. So usually we have textbooks, as you know. But because, we're not meeting together and it's as hard as it is to distribute the books usually, it's always like a little bit, it's always like intense. It's like books come and, who's getting a book and we have lists and everything and it's always a little hectic. It would be more hectic if this morning I was running around and dropping up at everyone's house. I'm just saying it would be a little bit more hectic. So in lieu of a physical textbook, what I'm going to do is when we come up to a text, I will be sharing my screen, and on my screen, I will have the textbook, like a digital version of the textbook. So when I read the texts, you'll see it and you'll have it. And if you ever want a text after the class or you want to refer to a text, just let me know and I can hook you. We'll figure out a way how to connect you with that. But for the normative purpose of this class, I'll just be putting it up on the screen. So the course is entitled Beyond Belief. Beyond Belief. And there are certain lists that are very important in Judaism, like the 10 Commandments. That's a good top 10 list. Before Letterman, right, God's like, I got a top 10 list. This is great. Number 1. Letterman started with 10 and went down to 1. God starts with 1 and goes up to 10. Everyone has their own style. I'm not going to judge who's better. I personally prefer Letterman. Wait, sorry. Anyway, but everyone's got their way of doing things. So we have, of course, the 10 Commandments, but there's another very famous list in Judaism, and that is the 13 Principles of Faith. 13 Principles of Faith, known in Hebrew as the Yud Gimel Ikrim, the 13 Principles. These are fundamental ideas, Jewish ideas, that really set the tone. I don't know if it sets the tone, but it depicts, it gives us a really solid foundation of understanding what Judaism is about. What does Judaism believe in? What does Judaism stand for? What is Judaism? Take a look at these. If we explore the 13 Principles of Faith, we have a very good idea. So this course is about analyzing the 13 Principles of Faith. First question we're going to address is, where do these 13 principles come from? Okay, where do they come from? And the answer is, they were articulated, they're principles of Jewish faith, but this specific list is articulated by none other than Rambam.
Maimonides.
Yes, exactly right, by Maimonides. Rambam Maimonides is the author of, or the one who compiled in this list, the 13 Principles of Faith. So who was Maimonides? I'm very glad you asked. Maimonides, when you look throughout the annals of Jewish history, there are certain scholars that are so famous that they really rise to the top. Maimonides is one such scholar. Maimonides was born in the year 1135. He was born in Spain, in Cordoba, Spain. Maimonides' family had to flee Spain when things got a little bit dicey with the rise of radical Islam. So they had to flee Spain. They went to northern Africa. They emigrated across northern Africa. Maybe I'm going the wrong direction. I'm not sure how the screens are going, right? Kind of left to right. And ultimately, Maimonides spent many, many, many years living in Egypt. He lived in the land of Egypt, or in the country of Egypt. Now, this was not something that he himself felt was ideal. You may or may not know this, but there's actually a biblical commandment for Jews not to live in Egypt. It says once we got out of Egypt, remember Passover? Yeah, like a week ago, 2 weeks ago, right? Passover is all about getting out of Egypt. The Torah says once you got out of Egypt, don't go back to Egypt. Don't live in Egypt. However, Jewish law provides that in cases of necessity, if life is in danger and the only place to go is Egypt for whatever reason, or if finances are necessary, then one is allowed to live in Egypt. And Maimonides lived in Egypt because that's where he found the opportunity to make a living. What did he do in Egypt? So as many of you know, Maimonides was the royal physician. And it's very interesting how he became a physician. He originally was a full-time scholar who was supported by his brother David, or David. We'll call him David. I don't know if David, that pronunciation was around back then. So David. His brother David, Maimonides' name was Moshe. Moshe ben Maimon. His father's name was Maimon. His name was Moshe. Moses Maimonides. Maimonides is like the son of Maimon. So Moshe, so his name was Moshe. His brother's name was David. His brother was a businessman, and he made the money, and he would support his brother, the scholar. Well, as it happened, one time his brother went out on a ship and never returned. By all accounts, there was some sort of storm at sea and a shipwreck, and his brother lost his life. Well, the tragedy was felt by the whole family, the loss of life. For Maimonides, it also meant the end of financial support. So what did he do? Like any good Jewish boy would do, or girl, he went ahead, he got some medical books, he read them, and he became a doctor. That's it. You got to support yourself, so he became a doctor. That's it. What are you going to do? So that's how he got into medicine. And he was so prominent that he became the royal doctor. In one of his letters written later in his life, Maimonides describes his schedule. His schedule was brutal. He would wake up early in the morning, he would do his prayers, and then he would head out to the palace. And he would be attending in the palace to the king and to whoever was needed by the royal physician. He would be there pretty much all day. In the evening, he would come home, and he writes in this letter that when he came home, there was a line outside of his door. Who was outside of his door? Who was lining up? The Jewish community, the people the people that needed in his community, that needed medical advice and help. And so he would excuse himself, go inside, grab a few bites to eat, and then he would greet one by one everybody with their problems. He didn't make home visits, they made a home visit to his home, and that's where he would treat them and advise them. He writes in his letters that he was so tired sometimes and so exhausted that he would be lying down and meeting the patients. This was before psychology and shrinks and couches, but this was him on the couch practicing medicine and giving advice to those that needed advice. Maimonides' output. And then after that, that's when he would start writing. Like after he met everybody, then he would sit down and pen his great works. He is renowned for writing some of the most important works on Jewish law. And again, I have to be very clear, he didn't make up Jewish law. But what he did was he took the entire body of Mishnah and Talmud, which is the entire body of the oral law, which is the exposition on the written law, i.e. the 5 books of Moses. So you have the 5 books of Moses that lays out the law, but then you have the whole oral tradition of Torah that kind of explicates and explains all of those details, or all of the laws in all their details. But the Talmud can be very disorganized sometimes, and you have a lot of debate and dispute. Maimonides went through the entire Talmud, the entire body of Torah, in both the written and oral forms. And what he did was, he compiled the law, the final law, bottom line, what should we do, what shouldn't we do, and he organized it in a way, and he wrote it in a way that is unparalleled till today. There is no other author, there's no other scholar in Jewish history that has compiled the laws of the entire Torah, including temple law that we don't have, that's not in practice today because we don't have a temple in Jerusalem. But he compiled the entire the entire collection of Jewish law in an incredibly clear language, Hebrew, incredibly concise, and just completely authoritative that cover the entire expanse of Jewish law. Maimonides got some flack for writing in his introduction that all you need to do is study the 5 books of Moses and this book, and that's all you need to know. He caught some flack for that. But what he meant to say was, the Mishnah and the Talmud is going to tell you all the opinions, and you might come out from that experience confused. But if you study the 5 books of Moses, and then you study my works, the works of Mishnah Torah, you'll have clarity on the law. And again, he took some flack for that, but ultimately his work stands for itself, and it speaks for itself in its brilliance and its erudition and its breadth and depth and all that stuff. On his tombstone, I believe he's buried in Tiberias. Yeah, he's buried in Tiberia in Israel. He was taken from Egypt to the Holy Land upon his passing. And it says on his gravestone the following words. I'm going to say it in Hebrew and then translate. Mimoshe va'ad Moshe lo kam kemoshe. From Moses until Moses, there was no one like Moses. That's what it says on his gravestone. From Moses, Moses. To Moses, Maimonides, there was no one like Moses. That's a way of kind of equating the original Moses to Moses Maimonides, who lived thousands of years later. Maimonides was a unique scholar. He was brilliant. He was completely proficient in Jewish studies, in Jewish law, in Jewish philosophy. He was completely proficient in Greek philosophy and mythology. He was an expert on Aristotle, which we'll explore today. He was an expert astronomer, scientist, physician. What couldn't he do? He also knew how to play the horses, the track. I'm kidding. Maimonides, that was a joke. Maimonides was a scholar. He knew everything. And he wrote incredible works. I mentioned his work on halacha, on Jewish law. He also wrote, of course, the famous book of Jewish philosophy, Guide for the Perplexed, Moreh Nevuchim, which, very controversial, because it explained Torah in Jewish law in philosophical terms, which some thought was too intellectualizing the holy traditions, and they felt that it needed to remain somewhat obscure and not explained. But he felt, because of the proliferance of Greek philosophy, it was important that Jewish philosophy be put out there so that people could understand Judaism from a philosophical. Those that were thinking along philosophical terms should have a way of understanding Judaism in that manner as well. Maimonides' 13 Principles of Faith were written, I believe, in his commentary on the Mishnah. Again, he wrote many works, including a commentary on the Mishnah, which is the first iteration of the oral Torah as it was written down. In his commentary, he compiles these 13 articulations of faith. So throughout this course, what we're going to do is go through all 13 over the next total of 6 sessions. We're going to go through 13 these 13 principles. We're going to go not necessarily in order, starting with 1. For example, today we're going to start with number 10. And we're going to skip around a little bit, but we're going to cover all the 13 principles of faith, and hopefully you and I will gain an appreciation of what exactly are these 13 principles, and really what exactly is Judaism? What does Judaism stand for? What does Judaism believe in? What does Judaism say, and how is it different than other philosophies, than Greek philosophy, than Aristotelian philosophy? How is it different than other religions, perhaps? What is unique about Judaism? This will come out throughout these sessions together. One more thing that we're going to talk about is, what is faith? 13 principles of faith. Well, what's faith anyway? What is faith? What does it mean to believe in something or to have faith in something? Is it blind? Is faith blind? We can ask the question, is love blind? But is faith blind? Or is there something else to faith? We're going to explore what Judaism has to say about faith. Okay, that's all by way of introduction. We're about to jump into some texts. Let me check in, make sure everyone's with me. Everyone with me so far? Yes? You can head nod or thumbs up or whatever. Okay, awesome. There's even emoji, thumb up emoji. I love that. Okay, good. Good. Okay. We're going to start by exploring misunderstandings. Misunderstandings in life are so common. It's so common to not really understand each other and therefore be maybe disagreeing about something, but it's because we're talking about different things. Reminds me of a story that I've told before, I think, where there was once a great Hasidic rabbi, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of the town of Berdichev, who once met somebody. And he said, "Hey, I haven't seen you around. What's going on?" And the guy says, "You know what? I became an atheist." "You became an atheist? Tell me about that." He says, "Look, I don't believe in God. God is this, and God is that, and God is the other." He starts ripping into God and religion and all that stuff. The rabbi's listening, and he says, "You know what? I actually agree with you. The God that you don't believe in, I also don't believe in." Right? Right? Whatever conception of God that you were taught, that you've rejected, frankly, he says, I also reject. That's also that I agree with you. So sometimes it's important to know what we're talking about to make sure we're talking about the same thing. Because we might be having a disagreement, but we might actually agree with each other. Because we're disagreeing using language that we're not understanding the same way, perhaps. So let's talk about misunderstandings. There's a story that I love, Kissinger and Golda Meir. You know this story? Henry Kissinger, Golda Meir. So Golda Meir, right, the famous, the epic Prime Minister of Israel. So she was once speaking with Kissinger, and she said, "Look, you gotta, as the Secretary of State, you have to put Israel high priority, right? Israel needs to be a high priority for the United States." So Kissinger said, "Listen, with all due respect, I'm an American first, I'm a Jew second. Sorry, let me rewind. I'm an American first, I'm Secretary of State second, and I'm a Jew third." She smiled and she said, "Perfect, because in Hebrew, we read from right to left." That's what she said. In Hebrew, we read from right to left. Jew, Secretary of State, American. So let's talk about misunderstandings or different ways of viewing things. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to pull up text number 1. All right, I want to check in to make sure that you all can see this. Yes? Thumbs up if you can see that. Yes? I'm going to make it bigger.
Looks great.
Okay.
Yes, with C.
Okay, here we go. Anybody familiar with Portuguese? Maybe? Okay. How would you pronounce that first word? On the
Beijo.
Beijo. Good.
Beijo.
We say it one more time?
Beijo.
Beijo. So beijo is Portuguese for kiss.
Beijo. Very good.
There you go. What's that? I'm just reading the text. It's right there. All right. This is beijo is Portuguese for kiss. Contextually, it's completely ubiquitous as an email sign-off, even for people you don't know very well. And logically, a lot of Brazilians who write emails in English translate the signature part of the email too. Be that as it may, beijos in English is just wrong. Even though I've gotten emails from a lot of Brazilians over the past couple of years, I still think it's weird to see a business email that ends kisses, even though I know they're just the air cheek kind. On the other hand, English closing phrases like best or regards sound completely ridiculous and way too formal if you're talking to a Latin American. My solution? I put everything in English, but the beijos stay Portuguese beijos. I was thinking about this today, how interesting it is that you can have a word where the cultural context is so different that there's literally just no way to translate it. And so the point of this text is to say that sometimes words are lost in translation, and they don't translate from one culture to another culture. You'll see why I'm mentioning this. It's a very important point why I'm mentioning this, but you'll see where it's leading in a moment. But just understand this concept. You could have a word that makes perfect sense in Portuguese, and if you're signing off an email in Brazil, you're going to put that kisses in a business email. In America, it's a lawsuit. I mean, what's going on? Kisses? First of all, quarantine. Second of all, what's going on, right? No kisses. Best of regards. Or, formally yours. But it's a different culture. So words don't translate sometimes. And I'll tell you, there's another word that I want to share with you that is a very popular Jewish word. We're still not getting to the punchline yet. Still building it up. But let's talk about another word. The word that I'm referring to is tzedakah. Now, if I ask you what the Hebrew word tzedakah means in English, please, you can feel free to unmute yourself. What does the Hebrew word tzedakah mean? Tzedakah.
Charity.
Charity. Pretty much everyone's going to say it means charity. Tzedakah is charity. Well, what if I told you that that's a little bit of a different translation, or maybe a bit of a mistranslation? Take a look at the next text. I'm going to share my screen once again, and now we're up to text number 2. Here is the difference between tzedakah and charity. Text 2. Charity implies kindness. Kindness and tzedakah actually have opposite meanings. Kindness highlights the fact that one is a good person. In other words, even though he is not obligated to give the other person anything, he nevertheless gives because of the goodness of his heart. Again, so let's pause here for a moment. What is charity, or what does charity evoke? Charity evokes the notion of giving even though I didn't have to give. Right? Charity is about kindness and going above and beyond. Tzedakah, by contrast, implies righteousness, tzedek. Right? The word tzedek, like tzaddik, is about righteousness, which has 2 outcomes. A, one is obligated to give to others, since he knows that he is not giving anything that belongs to him anyway. God merely gave him a safekeeping for the sake of the other person. And B, just as she relies on God to give her what she needs, even though he doesn't owe her anything, so too she can be relied on and is obligated to give others, even though she doesn't owe them anything. So here we have 2 implications and 2 beautiful lessons from the word tzedakah that simply don't exist in the English word charity. Charity implies that a person did not have to do what they did, but they went above and beyond, and they gave in a very kind way, in a very generous way, and they gave. Tzedakah is something else. Tzedakah implies an obligation, a sense of this is the right thing to do. Righteousness from the expression right. This is not just charitable. It's actually justice. It's doing what's right. Because essential to the Jewish conception about money and blessings is that God gives us what we need, plus a little bit more to share with others. And so if we don't share with others, then we're pocketing the extra, the percentage of extra that God has given us specifically for that purpose. Imagine if you've been entrusted. Imagine if your friend says, hey, I'm going out of town, but can you take this money? I'm giving you some money. Can you go give it to Yankel, Schmerel, whoever it is, right? Give it to our mutual friend. Give it to that person. I promised I would give them those funds, but I'm headed out of town right now. Can you please pass that along? If you pocket that, that's not kosher. That's called theft. It's misappropriation. You've been given a deposit for safekeeping. You've been given something to be a good steward, to pass on to someone else, and here you're pocketing it. This is the Jewish conceptual framework of tzedakah. This is not charity. Charity is I didn't have to do it whatsoever, but I gave out of the kindness of my heart. And although that's beautiful, of course that's beautiful, tzedakah is something else. Tzedakah means that I know that this is the right thing to do, that I'm obligated to give because I've been given extra to then pass along. That's one point. Second point is, just like God doesn't owe us anything but gives us, so too, we don't owe anybody anything, but we give them nonetheless. We help each other, we take care of each other, and that's the way that God likes it, and that's the way that we're meant to be. Listen, we live in a time now that we know we rely on each other. Even as isolated as we are, we rely on each other. So that's all implicit in the word tzedakah. The point of all of this is not a class on tzedakah, but the point of all of this is to understand that sometimes words and phrases get lost in translation. And very often, a word that we think means something, means a certain thing, really means something totally else, totally different. So if you hear the word tzedakah in your mind, you think charity. So yeah, it's a rough translation, and it kind of means sort of the same thing. It's giving, I guess. But in essence, it means something different. The reason why I'm saying all this, why we talked about Bezos and however maybe I'm messing up the translation, the pronunciation, and tzedakah, the reason why we're talking about these things is simply to highlight this. The word faith. 13 principles of faith. The Hebrew word for faith is emunah. Emunah. If you want to write it in English or picture it in English, E-M-U-N-A. Emunah. Emunah is typically translated as faith. 13 principles of faith. So I'm here to tell you that it doesn't really mean faith. It doesn't really mean faith. It's a mistranslation. What Maimonides wrote were the 13 principles of emunah, but emunah is not the same as faith. What is it rather? It's not faith, it's rather, and listen carefully to this word, faithfulness. It's a different word. It's not faith and faithful. What is faith? Faith implies some sort of blind. I have a printer going off in the room that I'm in, so you hear some background noise. Faith implies a blind allegiance to something. Like, I don't know it, I can't see it, but I have faith in it. That's what faith implies. But what about the word faithful? Right? If you say that this person is faithful, what does that mean? They believe in something? That's not what it means. Unmute yourself and give me a working translation of the word faithful. What does faithful mean? What does it mean in the way we use it?
Loyal.
Loyal. What else? What else? What else does faithful apply? Loyal Give me some other words. Again, unmute yourself.
Devoted.
Devoted.
That's what.
Good.
True, truth, true.
True.
Being
Yes. Yes.
Being
All good. What is it?
Being true to something.
Good.
Belief.
Commitment. Good. Faithful means that you are dedicated. You're devoted. Faithful. Right? A faithful spouse means that you can trust them. These are not the 13 principles of faith. These are 13 principles of faithfulness. I.e., what it means to be a person that is faithful to Judaism. What does it mean to be faithful, to be committed, to be dedicated? That's what these 13 articulations are. It's less of a list of 13 things that are kind of, airy, fairy, ethereal, magical unicorn potion, whatever. But rather, 13 articulations of faithfulness. And to illustrate how the word emunah means faithful and not faith, I'm going to share my screen once again. Take a look at text number... Oh, actually, before we do that, hold on, give me 1 second. Take a look at text number 3 from Richard Dawkins. Faith is impelled by some deep inner conviction that something is true or right or virtuous, a conviction that doesn't seem to owe anything to evidence or reason, but which nevertheless the believer feels as totally compelling and convincing. It has nothing to do with evidence or reason. That's what faith means. Maybe. But what about faithfulness? Here we go. That's the Hebrew word emunah. Aleph, mem, vav, nun, hey. Emunah. Let's take a look at text number 4. This is the first prayer in the Jewish liturgy that we recite in the morning upon waking up. It's a beautiful prayer, and it's almost a meditation. It's a meditational prayer in which we literally think about the fact that we're alive, that we just woke up and we have life, and we offer gratitude and thanks for the life that we've just been given, once again, upon waking up. Text number 4. I offer thanks to you, living and eternal King, referring to God, of course, for you have mercifully restored my soul within me. Take a look at this last line. Your faithfulness is great. And the Hebrew is Rabba emunasecha. Your emunah is great. We're not telling God that God is a believer. God, your faith is great. Who does God believe in? Right? I'm sure God believes in God. Right? It's not faith. It's faithfulness. And what we're saying is that we're acknowledging God as the faithful giver of life. That we can rely on God to give us life again tomorrow. So we acknowledge the fact that we're alive today, and we throw in the line at the end. Oh, FYI, we trust you tomorrow, right? It's going to happen again, right? We'll wake up again tomorrow, right? Your faithfulness is great. We believe in you. We trust in you. Faithful is different than faith. Faith, just the word faith, implies blind allegiance, following something irrationally, and we can make fun of faith maybe. Faith, yeah, it's a faith, crutch to the masses, blah, 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 all that stuff. But on a deeper level, or on a completely different level, in the Hebrew, it's not faith, faithfulness. And when it comes to us, that's text 4 is with regards to God. We're telling God that we believe, that we're trusting in God to keep us going today and tomorrow as well. But when it comes to us, what does it mean to be faithful? It's not what we believe in. It's about being loyal to these principles. It's about living with these principles. These are not 13 articulations of blind Jewish belief. What Maimonides put together are 13 principles that guide our lives. How are we meant to live our lives? What does it mean to live a faithful life, living with our ideals? What does it mean to live a good life? To live a centered life, to live a grounded life spiritually. Here we have 13 articulations. So again, the first thing that I wanted to explain is that sometimes words are misunderstood. Sometimes words are mistranslated, and it means something completely different than the original intention. 13 principles of not faith, but faithfulness, and that changes everything. Now I need to mention, well, actually before I mention, let me just check in. Does what I'm saying make sense? Faithfulness? Okay, good. Now, along with that, I must mention that indeed in Judaism, it's true, there are things that there is an element of belief in Judaism. In other words, things that we can't empirically prove, but that we ascribe to nonetheless. But, and here's the important but, in Judaism, we seek to minimize the leap as much as possible. I'm going to say that one more time. There will inevitably be things that we can't fully understand, but Judaism calls upon us to embrace nonetheless. But the goal in Jewish studies is to minimize the gap between what we know and what we don't know yet. Does that make sense? It's to learn as much as we can and to grow in our learning to the point that what we believe in other words, what we embrace beyond what we know, is as short of a hop as possible. Let me give you an example. Back in the day, people used to fly in airplanes. Remember that? People used to fly in airplanes? Like 4 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago. Remember, like back in the day? Okay. So people used to fly in airplanes. Buy a ticket, go to the airport, you go through security, all that stuff. Yeah. Wait by the gate, and then they start boarding. And then you line up, right? You line up in different lines. Every airline has its shtick. You know, God forbid you're last, because then your luggage is going to be who knows where. They take it before you enter the plane, and they just throw it off those stairs. Whoop, done, you're done, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? There's fear. There's fear amongst travelers back in the day. Like, will my luggage, my carry-on, I packed everything in a carry-on, but will the carry-on be carried on or not? It's such existential fear. Anyway, so, which by the way is a direct result of the baggage fees, right? Because now with baggage fees, everyone's taking more carry-ons, but with more carry-ons, there's not enough space. It's like this whole Lord of the Flies situation on the airplane back in the day. So then you fly. Yeah? You're flying. You're in a chair in the sky. Fantastic. Let me ask you a question. How do you know the pilot is qualified to fly the plane? How do you know? Faith. You don't know. You have no idea. In fact, you have no idea who the pilot is. In fact, you have no idea that there is a pilot. How do I know this? Because I fly back in the day, and I don't know. Yeah, there are people sitting there when you come on the plane. If you look left as you board, there are some people sitting there. They could be props. You don't know who they are. You don't know their names. You don't know their certification. You know nothing about them. You don't even know that they're still there. They closed the door. Who knows if anybody's there? And yet, we fly back in the day all the time. You put your life in the hands of those that you have no idea about. Is that faith? I call that faith. Now, it's not blind faith. Why is it not blind faith? Because you trust the airline. You trust the FAA. You trust in God. I don't know. You trust. And therefore you believe that there's a pilot and there's a co-pilot and they're qualified and they know what they're doing and they've had enough sleep. You trust all of these things. But in life, we're always making leaps. We never know. What do we know? What do we know? We don't know anything 100%. There's always an element of, well, I think, I know enough to think. That's the way we work. Because we don't know 100% about anything. So you know up to where you can know, and then the rest. You take a jump. Now, if I were to say they've created this new technology, cordless bungee jumping, are you in? No, not just bungee jumping, cordless bungee jumping, are you in? No. Why? Because you're going to say that something's wrong there. That doesn't make sense. Parachuteless parachuting. Nope, not going to do it. Why? Because that doesn't make sense. So we know enough to know that leap of faith, oh no, trust me, it works. You have a cell phone? That doesn't have wires either. So new bungee jumping technology. We don't need wires. Cut the cord. Netflix forever. It's like we don't need that stuff anymore. Cut the landline, right? Off the grid. It's all cellular. Not going to do it. Because it's too much of a leap of faith. Are you going to trust someone that they can safely jump without a cord? Not going to happen. But an airplane with a Delta, with a this, with an FAA, with inspectors, with people in uniforms, all right, we assume, we hope, we trust. Judaism says the same thing about God and about spiritual things. And that is, don't cordless bungee jump. It's not all hocus pocus, fairy tales faith. In fact, the Torah never says believe in God. Throughout Scripture, it never says believe, the words believe in God. It never says that. What does it say? Know God. Not believe in God. Know God. And I know what you're thinking. Well, how do I get to know God? First of all, you're in the right place, because we're going to talk about this over the next 6 weeks. But what it means is learn enough about the universe and how everything works and what God actually is and isn't. Like I said before with the story about the atheist, right? What God is or isn't, and then we can have a better understanding of what is God and then what is faith. What we can understand, where our understanding caps out or maxes out, and what the little bit left to, once we know so much, we're able to trust the rest. We're able to assume the rest. But to assume the whole thing or trust the whole thing, that's not where we're meant to be. Yeah, a child, what are you going to do? A child doesn't have the capacity to know, so it's all about belief. Everything to a child is, the process of education is learning more and more and more. But again, I want to be very clear here. The goal is to learn as much as we can to minimize faith. Not to minimize faith in that way, but to minimize the gap between what we know and what we believe in or accept in a super rational way. The goal is not to live in a super rational acceptance belief state, but to know and to be well grounded in knowledge. which takes us into the 10th principle of the 13 principles of faith or faithfulness. Maimonides describes in principle number 10 the omniscience and providence of God. Let me explain those two terms. Omniscience means how God is all-knowing, and providence means how God is all-observing. All-knowing and all-observing. Kind of like the government. Kidding. Right? All-knowing and all-observing. If you and I can know God, that probably means that God can know us. Right? We're talking about knowing God, not believing in God. Fairy tales. But knowing God, getting to know God. Like really what God is. That's the goal. That's the holy grail in Judaism. That's what we're doing. That's what we're pursuing. To know, to have a firm understanding of who and what God is. It works both ways. We understand God and God understands us. This is in stark contrast to what the Greek philosophers like Aristotle said about God. The Greek philosopher said the following. I'm going to share my screen. Let's hit the share screen. Here we go. Okay. Let me tell you some. Oops, hold on. This is from the Encyclopedia of Philosophy and Religion on Aristotle. So this is straight up Aristotelian philosophy. Aristotle stressed God's absoluteness, understanding the divine to be the unmoved mover and final cause to which all is related, while remaining in its self-sufficiency and perfection, unrelated to anything. He knows his own being, but not the world. Aristotle and the other great Greek philosophers believed that there was an entity, a being called God. And they believed that God was at the top of the food chain, so to speak. That God is the first cause, the prime mover. But they deeply believed that God has nothing to do with this reality, with this universe, with this world. Why? I'm going to cut to the chase right here and tell you the explanation. And this is Maimonides in his Guide for the Perplexed, explains it in depth, the exact logical steps that Aristotle and the other philosophers came to arrive at this conclusion. Aristotle believed, and the other philosophers believed, that God was too perfect to be involved in such a messy universe. The world is messy. The world is corrupt, can be corrupt. Human beings can be corrupt, right? This is a world that has both good but also evil. And the philosophers did not believe that a perfect, pristine God could be mired and mixed in any way with this world. And so to protect God, they pushed God up to be completely outside of anything relating to this world. So why does evil happen? What? How come God doesn't stop evil from happening? Does God not know? Does God not care? Can God not stop it from happening? Aristotle would say, God is not involved. God is not knowing what's going on. This is existing. This is so low. God is so high. This is so low. God doesn't even care what's going on here. God doesn't know, and God doesn't care. It's like somebody once asked their mother, what's the difference between ignorance and apathy? And she said, I don't know and I don't care. Okay. Anyway, so In Aristotle's view of the universe, God is, but is totally out of the picture. Contrast this with Maimonides. Take a look at principle number 10. I'm about to share it with you. This is the punchline right here. Principle number 10, the 10th principle, text number 11. Maimonides, take a look. Listen carefully. He knows, God knows the deeds of mankind, and is not unmindful of them, contrary to the view of he, Aristotle, who says God has forsaken the earth. Instead, it is as it states, great in counsel and mighty in works, your eyes see all the ways of man. Jeremiah. And also in Genesis, God saw how great man's wickedness was on the earth. Cue up the flood. It also states in Genesis, because of the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah has become so great, God will destroy those cities. This is the 10th foundation, the 10th principle. What is the 10th principle? That God is not removed. God is not somewhere out there playing 18 rounds at Pebble Beach while we're doing our thing, well, whatever, in the divine Pebble Beach, beyond quarantines and everything, and we're stuck here and God has no clue and doesn't care about the going ons. That's the philosophical view. That's the Greek philosophical view of God. They wanted to be nice to God by not letting God get mixed in with this imperfection. Now, Judaism says something else. Jewish philosophy and Jewish mysticism and spiritual teaching says, you got it wrong. Because being great doesn't mean being removed from. Being truly infinite means that you're not only beyond, but you're also within. A truly infinite being is not just beyond the finite, but is also within the finite. Because if you say that the infinite God cannot be found in a finite space, then guess what? You have just limited God. I'll say that one more time. If you posit that God is so big that God cannot be found in this world, guess what? You just made God small. In your attempt to make God big, you just limited God. You said God can't be here. For you to live in infinite space and in finite space. And God knows what is going on here as well. This is the 10th principle of Jewish faithfulness. And we're reminded when we see acts of divine providence, when we see moments that coincide so perfectly that no one else could have designed that. No one else could have constructed that I would meet this person who would be connected to that person, who would have that connection, who would help me in that way. No one could have constructed that incredible web and labyrinth of pieces, of puzzle pieces coming together, other than some higher power. That's when we see God's presence. That's when we see God's providence and omniscience. This is principle number 10. So in short, to summarize and conclude today's class, the Greeks, the philosophers, other philosophers as well, believe that God is too big. God is too big to fail. God is too big for this stuff. Nah, God's not involved here. He's too big. Judaism teaches that God is so big, he can also be small. God is so infinite, he's not just big, because that's also a limitation. God is truly infinite, which means God is as much here as anywhere else. And because God is here, God knows what's going on, and God cares what's going on. And the first takeaway is, number one, what we do matters objectively. In the worldview of Aristotle, it doesn't matter what you do. If you take it to the extreme, what you do doesn't matter. God doesn't know, God doesn't care. Right? It doesn't make a difference. Do whatever you want. Yeah, they might say philosophically it's not right to harm someone else, but why not? If it benefits me, why not? I mean, theoretically, why not? But Judaism has a different take altogether. This is not random, and this is not devoid of a divine plan, and this is not devoid of God. God is right here, and God is knowing, and God is caring, and God is watching. And therefore, what I do absolutely matters in an absolute way. Everything I do makes a difference. We know today, quarantine, where I go, how I sneeze, how I talk, who I touch, who I don't touch. That makes a difference. It's no different than the cosmic scheme. Everything we do makes a difference. Why? Because God is here. That's takeaway number one. And number two, we should never feel alone. In the Aristotelian worldview, we're alone. It's just us, and that's it. In the Jewish worldview, we're never alone, even in difficult times, even even quarantined, sheltering in our own homes, we're never truly alone. There is always the Creator with us. And hopefully that can provide us some measure of comfort and some measure of companionship as we navigate these challenging times. So, principle number 10 is God's omniscience and God's providence. Unlike the philosophers, Judaism maintains that God is here. And the more we look and keep our eyes open, the more signs we can see. It's not a matter of blind faith. It's a matter of being open and opening our eyes to embrace it. And what does it mean to be faithful to principle number 10? It's not about faith. I believe. It's easy to believe, or easy to say that we believe. Well, faithfulness. Emunah means faithfulness. How are we loyal to principle number 10? Number one, being careful with what we do, knowing that every action matters. And number two, not feeling alone, knowing that we're all connected, and we're connected with purpose in an absolutely meaningful way. All right, that's it for today's class. I hope you enjoyed the class. Next week, we're going to jump into prophecy, which is great. Oh, I think I just did that. I'm telling you what we're going to do next week. Wow. You heard it here first. I'm predicting with prophecy that next week we're going to speak about prophecy. But that's also because I know what I'm teaching next week. So next week, it's not an act of prophecy. It's an act of just foreshadowing what we're going to do. I look forward to seeing you same bat time, same bat channel. Thank you for joining me today. And I think that's it.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Pleasure. If anybody has questions or anything they need, email me or call me.
Okay.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
All right. Bye.